Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Remette RTB. Why do they call it that? I would imagine because it's got what you could call a little stinger in the back of it. This is I think they call this like a fruit fork on the website. There's a lot of different potential uses for this. A toothpick, right? A little poker, scraper, whatever you could call this. I would call it a sausage fork. I don't know. I find myself more often cutting like a piece of summer sausage or something and then using something like this to poke. That, to me, that's more of the use for it, I guess, that I would find beneficial, but there's a lot of different uses there. And initially when I unboxed this, I kind of laughed about that, but carrying this for a couple of days, I thought about all the different things that would come in handy for, and I realized, yeah, it's kind of a decent idea. This is very competitively priced considering it is titanium and M390 and also made well. We're going to talk about all the different elements, but it is available. I'll link it down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to Remette for sending it in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of the RTB. Not a tiny knife, but definitely on kind of the medium small side at 7 inches. Blade length is coming in a little over 3, about 3 1/16. Cutting edge is coming in at about 2.85 inches. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. Up against the 8010 and the 8020.5, obviously it's way smaller than things like or knives like the 8010. Actually somewhat similar, I guess, to the 8020.5. Interestingly, it actually has slightly more cutting edge. Very, very similar handle profiles. Look at this. If we cut this end off, right? This is just an extension of that. But as far as your choke up spots, your primary hand position finger guard, right, or what the flipper tab is, very similar here, right? So there you go. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Again, very similar to the second or the smaller option here with, again, incredibly similar ergonomic zones, a little bit more cutting edge despite the Para 3 being slightly longer. And then finally up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action on this knife? If you are unfamiliar with Remette, they do a pretty darn good job in terms of manufacturing quality. This runs on bearings and has a really great detent considering I would call this a pretty low profile flipper tab, and these don't always work out super well. They're not necessarily the most satisfying, but light switching it, we're good. How about push button? Honestly, yeah, it's pretty good. Also, it's knocked down at the edges. Maybe slightly sharp on the edges, but not bad. The best way to flip it is definitely the light switch. Your disengagement, right? Let's see where that detent ball is, right there. So there is actually still room. If you can see right here, that's where it's at. The detent ball is now trying to enter the face or come up on the face of the blade, I guess. So right there, it's up on the face. That means it just barely misses the double clutch element that I always talk about. So no double clutch on this, but it is close, so be cognizant of that. You can absolutely disengage and let it fall down into the closed position. It's not like it's not smooth. It's definitely smooth. It's just going to need a little tiny bit of breaking in. So just a little bit of encouragement here. This has gotten slightly better since I got it without any movement from centering or any lockup issues or anything like that. So it's doing exactly what I expected to. Thumb studs, really nicely shaped thumb studs. As far as engagements, you have little steps there. They don't get too peaky, which is something that bothers people, right? If you get really pointy thumb studs, they'll definitely bother you. Doing the thumb flick, no problem. Doing the reverse flick, no problem. They are ever so slightly in the cutting path. So that's fine because of the forward choil. They're way out there to basically right where the initial cutting edge starts, and they are positioned pretty much ideally considering the size of the knife to deploy it. They probably could have done without the thumb studs, but I know a lot of people like the combination of flipper and thumb stud, and I think they honestly did a pretty darn good job. As far as the disengagement zone for the frame lock, you can see the show side scale is cut slightly lower than the lock side, and it is chamfered on the inside there, and that means that disengaging it is very comfortable, very natural, and very, very easy. Overall, the action's really great. Honestly, for a knife that's on the smaller side, which I don't normally gravitate towards, not bad at all. Pretty good, actually. Let's do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. Excuse me, I bumped the camera there. Ever so slightly thicker, I think. Let's take another look. Let's take a closer look, shall we? Slightly thicker, but contoured, which is nice, actually. Really like that. I'm glad that it's not flat. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is a wonderfully compact knife without being so small that you're going to forget that it's there. Shorter than the PM2, both length and height, and way smaller than the, shorter than the Para 3, length and height, way smaller than the PM2. Honestly, a super compact, very comfortable carry in my experience. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. That's the T8, sorry. I'm just always looking at that one bit always is so faded. The pivot there is definitely a T8. Lock bar insert screw, which you should never have to take out, is also a T8. And then the one body screw that's on each side is also a T8, and then you'll have a hidden pocket clip screw, which is probably a T6, could be a T8. Either way, this is like going to be unbelievably simple to take apart. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and weigh it. So materials here, what are we looking at? We are looking at contoured titanium for the frame with the slightest amount. Oh no, it's on both sides. On the lock side, yeah, there is a little cartridge liner here, and my best guess on this, because I didn't notice this, but my best guess is that this comes down to manufacturing simplicity. Instead of milling a teeny tiny hole to accept this little bee stinger, right, what they did is they milled out an entire slot, and then we've actually got like it's like a cap piece on there that just closes it off. That would be my best guess, because I can't see any other reason for that. Sometimes we see a cartridge liner on the inside that fits, right, so that they can manufacture all the internal frames the same way. And then the scales can be titanium, or they can be G10, or they can be carbon fiber, or whatever, right? In this case, I think it was just simplicity to make sure that this fits in there. And at the same time, it's, because like they'd have to mill out a very specific hole all the way. I don't know. That would be my guess, right? Either way, it doesn't affect the functionality of the knife at all. But the actual internal milling that I was talking about, you can see it a little bit right here. And you can also see it on this side right there. There's a little pocket that's milled out. So a little bit of weight reduction. So we have titanium backspacer, titanium pocket clip, and then we have M390 steel. Your weight comes in at 3.3 ounces, which is pretty good considering the blade length. And your balance is right behind the pivot in the primary index finger position. So the balance is honestly really, really nice there. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness, and then we will get into the meat and potatoes of this review. The blade stock thickness on this knife is coming in at 109 thousandths, so definitely on the thinner side. Alrighty, let's talk about this knife. It is a very traditionally shaped knife. There's nothing, super duper unique about the sheep's foot blade or the incredibly classic handle profile. In fact, if you're looking at this and you're thinking that looks like a copy of the insert whatever knife you're thinking of, the rest of the community can probably list at least 100 more models that look similar or identical. And that's not because it's copying anything. That's because this is one of the most classic profiles that you can get on a pocket knife, right? Nobody necessarily owns this handle profile or this blade profile. They are just used a lot. But it does work. I have a, I'll tell you the size of my hand so you guys can, kind of relate this however you're going to. But I wear an XL glove, which is not actually a huge hand size, right? That's fairly normal. I would say if you're a guy, large to XL is incredibly common. What I would actually call a large hand size would be a 2XL or a 3XL, right? I have a conspiracy about Home Depot just making men feel really good about buying gloves, right? Oh yeah, those are the XLs, right? Yeah, right. It's just like common hand size. But especially if you are truly somebody who's got big bear paws, right? 2XL or 3XL, you are not gonna like this. as somebody who wears an XL glove size, I already don't like the fact that my pinky is sliding off the edge and I'm getting the main lock-in in this 3-finger position. That is preference, though. That won't universally be true for everybody. So if you don't mind a 3-finger lock-in, you might not mind this. Truthfully, it's not uncomfortable. I just am very aware of my pinky sliding off the back end. The pocket clip is milled and not incredibly long. A little bit of a pointy end right here, but it's about right at the 50% line, maybe slightly less. Nothing about this is uncomfortable, especially when you choke up. It's actually pretty comfortable. The jimping, little slippery. Remette, this should be a little bit deeper and a little bit more bitey, not aggressive, but a little more bitey so that you can actually get meaningful traction on it. This feels a little bit slippery, but overall, the ergonomics are honestly not bad. If you have smaller hands, I think you'll enjoy this a lot more. Or again, like I said, if you don't mind a 3-finger lock-in. Overall, I would give the ergonomics roughly a B+. Not bad at all. No part of this makes me feel like I'm going to drop it. What are the holes for? Nothing. I mean, you could call it weight reduction if you wanted to. It is literally just adding a little bit of pizzazz to an otherwise incredibly boring and plain Jane scale setup. Interesting that the only real embellishment outside of the holes there is on the pivot. There's a little bit of, looks like design or laser work right there on both sides. Kind of like it. I'm not going to lie. It just adds a tiny little bit of personality. It doesn't take away from the knife. And honestly, I think the knife would be much more boring without it. I love this finish. It's like, I think they call it pearlescent. It's like a glass bead blasted finish, and it honestly looks really, really nice. It is probably not going to change the corrosion resistance one way or another versus a tumbled finish, maybe almost exactly the same on M390, which is already an incredibly stainless composition. Speaking of M390 and the blade composition, what is this heat treated to? Apparently 59 to 61, which tends to be the industry standard. But as you guys have heard me say a million times to companies like We Knives, that should be up by another point at least. 60 to 62, I think, is what most people would like to see it at. That is still just a preference technically, but most of us want to see it a little bit higher. So 59 to 61 is not bad. It's just not exactly what everybody likes to see, right? Could get lucky. 60 or 61 is great. 59 is not so great, right? But we'd like to see it, I think, a little bit higher. And I know that Remette is capable of doing that, so that would definitely be cool. But the geometry, like down towards the edge, honestly, it does get pretty darn thin, so that's definitely going to help it. I love sheep's foot blades as far as, you know, day-to-day cutting tasks. A little bit of belly, the nose is pointed down, so doing draw cuts, things like that. It's just about an ideal blade shape for EDC. So this toothpick thing, what is that really going to be useful for? Yeah, you could pick your teeth. You could pick your teeth with this. I do want to point out this is like a needle-like sharpness. It is super sharp, and it's also metal. You know, like I've accidentally jabbed myself with a wooden toothpick before, and that's no fun experience. But the wood gives, right? This will not give. It's titanium. It is a titanium needle. Now, over time, you'll probably dull this out a bit, but you could definitely poke yourself pretty good with it. So, will it work for picking your teeth? Yeah, it will. I would wash it every single time you use it because that's gross, right? Will it work as a fruit fork? Oh, yeah, I think it'll work perfectly. Like I said, if you are at a barbecue and you don't trust Susan's toothpicks or whatever, then you got your own, right? I honestly, you know, if I go to something like that and I get a bunch of summer sausage or whatever, and I forget my utensils, it's kind of nice, the idea of having like a blade and a little toothpick to be able to do that, right? There are also times, I think this is much more relatable. Every one of you, some of you might actually be this person, but every single one of you watching has that friend or that person you know whose pocket knife is essentially not a knife anymore. It's a folding piece of dull, jagged steel because the person carrying it never really knew exactly how to use a folding knife. To them, their folding knife is their screwdriver and their pry bar and their hammer and all this other stuff. But because they've been using it as that other stuff, it no longer can function as the tool it was designed for, which is a cutting tool. To them, it's still sharp, but their definition of sharp is essentially a steel wedge with no tip and a jagged, right? Basically unsafe. So this will come in handy in situations not where you need a pry bar or a hammer or a screwdriver. But in situations where you need to scrape something out of some area and you don't want to use the clean, sharp edge or tip of your knife, which absolutely you will come across, right? I can't tell you how many times I'm tempted to scrape something out or something falls into an area. I can't get my finger in there and I want to use my... You've got something like this. Who cares if the tip... In fact, it would do this thing better to be slightly less needle-like, right? So a little tiny pokey tool to scrape something out of some area or poke into something and use it as like a makeshift, utensil or whatever. It's not a bad idea to have back there, right? I always like the combination of thin, light pry tool and knife. Or I also don't necessarily mind the combination of a very, very small flathead screwdriver and knife, right? Anything that you can use to save the edge or tip of your knife, because you're going to want those things to continue to function. You're also going to want those things to continue to be easy to touch up. It is so much easier to touch up a knife that's been taken care of, right? If Larry from Parts, right, touching up his knife, it won't be touching it up. You're going to have to reprofile that thing because the guy's been using it like a freaking rock, for literally just like a caveman, like pounding rocks together for however many years. Because, hashtag use your stuff or whatever. Use a knife like a knife and use the appropriate tool depending on the task. I actually think it's kind of neat to include this. I don't know how often I'll use it, right? Probably for every 50 times that I use the blade, I might use this once. But it's nice to have something right there that will save me from being tempted to use the tip for something that I probably shouldn't use it for. The retention, like how well is this actually being held in there? A lot of you guys probably have Swiss Army knives that's missing the tweezers or the toothpick, right? Give you a kind of I guess the amount of pressure. I'm going to slowly increase the amount of pressure that I'm pushing. More than you'd think, but not a lot. The amount of force that it takes to get that out of there is basically this, right? If I'm using one hand and just sliding against it, it's not going to just release. There's definitely some type of like detent holding it in. So doing this, that's not going to pull it out of there. Doing this or anything like that, it's going to take quite a bit of deliberate force to push that out of there. But at the same time, there's also a decent chance that you'll lose it, especially if you're taking it out and using it all the time. Now, if you lose it, it doesn't really matter, because the knife is still going to function plenty well without it. Can the pocket clip be switched over into that position? No. And honestly, I feel like there should have been a way to implement this and at the same time make space for the pocket clip. It probably is a little bit more tricky than it looks, but I feel like the pocket clip and the head of this tool could have probably been exactly the same shape, and you could have made the space for both of these things on both sides, despite the relief cut being on this side. I'm sure that there would have been a way to implement it, and I'm kind of sad to see that it is right-handed only and we don't get to switch these over, but that's just the way it is. So anyways, there is a little lanyard bar back here, so if you like lanyards, you're good to go. We have a pretty standard ramp under the pocket clip, medium retention. It says Remette on the clip, which is okay, but I do appreciate that they kept all of the branding and billboarding off of the blade. It looks much better like that. I really appreciate that. We have a stop pin located in its traditional position with a little bit of shouldering there. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. I guess I'll show you guys. Sometimes I forget to show you the lockup percentage. So here we are right there. It's kind of hard to see it. Let's look at the total amount of engagement right here. There, that black spot. You're about 30 to 35% of the lock face, which is plenty. A couple of light taps are not going to get this knife to disengage, which in my opinion is plenty to prove that the knife will function for the tasks it was designed for. No lock stick whatsoever, no double clutch, no pivot lash. Smooth, a little tight, but that'll break in. In fact, it's getting smoother every single day. A nice detent, and your centering is almost exactly spot on. Maybe a hair to the left. Is that my imagination? Maybe a hair to the left. This could be adjusted with the pivot. I mean, it is super duper close. No detent lash either. 190 is either 195 or 199. Very competitive. Contoured titanium, little bit of milling, not much, right? Kind of a cool finish on the blade. Really nice materials. Reasonable heat treat, could be better. 5961 is not bad. It's just like that ho-hum kind of industry standard. You could get a 60 or 61 and it'll be great. You could get a 59 and the geometry of the blade is great. The compact carry profile, also great. I like the addition of the toothpick / fruit fork better than I thought, even if I don't plan to use it all that much. Again, if you're going to put that thing in your mouth, wash it. Ew, gross. Really wish that it could have been flipped around with the pocket clip. I think that's kind of a missed opportunity there. All things said and done, pretty competitive price tag, not bad at all. Remette, consider using S90V. You can hit it at 59 to 61 and it'll perform substantially better, and most people are going to feel like they're getting an even better value with that steel. But M390 is just fine. Honestly, all things considered, this is a pretty darn good knife. I think generally speaking, I'm going to recommend it, but to people who are like me, who don't like that third finger slipping off the back, you are not going to like this. If you like smaller, more compact knives, you still want premium elements, and you like the idea of having the little fruit fork in there, yeah, you're going to love this. This is actually pretty darn good. I'm going to put this in my recommended knives playlist. Nothing special, no reinvention of the wheel, but good. It's a good knife and reasonable value. That's going to be pretty much it, guys. Links for this knife down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.